Good, good. So we're ready to go. So there are some interesting stats that a lot of people don't realize are out there about startups, and I try and collect these things and keep them fresh because it's really kind of disastrous. And of course, we're not these statistics don't count what happened during COVID. I've been researching that to try and figure out what the real impact has been. It's going to be horrible, as you already know. But it's very difficult to even figure out how bad it is because a lot of these places just disappeared, and mostly restaurants. Oh my gosh, just as you know, the restaurant business has just been decimated. So things are so bad that I mean, they just kind of close up, walk away, and nobody really knows if they're really closed or if they're going to reopen or what's going on. So the statistics are not even in. But so these are just regular before COVID statistics to indicate a little bit about how hard it is to be in business. Generally, before COVID, we had about 627,000 businesses every year, but 595,000 closed. So it's sort of like, well, okay, so that's not very many left over, right? So kind of the question is, so what does that really look like? So those that stay in business each year, this is from SBA. So if you start off with 100%, only 78% make it to the second year. And then it goes down each year, 67, 59, 53. So by the time you get out 4 or 5 years, 50% of all businesses are gone. So you can see that's kind of a tough attrition rate. And then as we go on forward, when you get down to 10, you've got about 33% of them left. So it's not great. Why do they go out of business? And the answers are cash flow is number one. It's always been number one. People just simply run out of cash if they can't pay their bills. So you gotta pay your bills, and therefore we were talking a little bit about depreciation versus cash versus buying new equipment. Therefore, you have to guard your cash flow, and of course, well, how much time we spend on cash flow planning, and that's why that's so important. We've got a lot of people who are retiring. We're going to have, you can see 2015 was higher. By the time we get 2020 stats, which will probably be pretty soon, it's going to be higher yet. And of course, that's because baby boomers are retiring. And, they're all getting old and deciding to leave. And then COVID comes along, and the old people are scared to death they're going to die from COVID. And so they decide they're going to retire. And then you can't get them to come back, or they left, and then you can't get them to come back. You both might have had people where that happened. You might have employees just like, nah, I think we'll just stay home. I know I've got some clients that it's a very serious problem, and unfortunately, the old workers know how to work, and a lot of the young ones are not so keen on working as much as or as hard as the old ones. They haven't gotten used to it yet. And so what happens is that it's hard to replace all of your workers, your retired, workers that have been around for 30 years with really young workers. They're just not up to the job yet. So that's been really tough for COVID, and it's a tough problem. But you can see that of the ones that close, about 20% are just simply retiring. About the same number of them sold. They were going to retire, but they sold their businesses instead, basically. Now, a whole lot, this doesn't really show, this makes it look like, oh yeah, you sell and you get out of business, but only a very, very small number of businesses sell. And that's a very specialized kind of process that Ed has kind of taken us through, and we've done an awful lot of videos on how you create value in your company so that it will sell for more. Many business owners don't understand that. Sometimes they close because They opened a different business. They failed on one and they're trying a second time. Illness and injury, that's kind of an interesting one. People get ill, especially old people, and they don't open again. Credit is another reason. They just don't have enough credit to be able to run their business, kind of goes along with cash. And then you've got a few down here in the end, they died. You've got an ending project. Those are companies that deal with some of the really small companies that go from one project to another project to another project, and they just don't get another project. And then personal credit can be a big problem because that affects business credit when you're small. This is the number of establishments that are a year old.
You have some, Hannah is on there, but she can't see the screen.
Oh, they can't see the screen. Maybe that's because I should share it. Sorry, Hannah.
Oh, there she is.
Hello, Hannah. You're just sitting out there all by yourself. Sorry.
Just today. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, we will do a better job here and actually do this the right way. I think I'm doing it the right way.
Perfect. I see it.
Can you see something now?
I can. Thank you.
Okay, so all I have to do is bring up the right one. I can find it. Okay, here we go. All right, can you see that then? Oh, okay.
Yes, perfect.
So we're talking about statistics for small businesses and success and failure rates. So this will be interesting to you. So the number of new starts per year kind of goes up and down, but it wavers between 550 and about 700,000. And of course, right now, the number of businesses is exploding, but that's because we had a whole bunch of them dying. And of course, the interesting part of that is that really when you have something that's happened like this over the last year and a half, you end up opening markets. So you're in a good position. You have fewer competitors than you did before. They're gone. You're still in business, but people will, as they begin to come back in, they're not going to have as many choices. So that's going to be good for your business. Eventually, then others will figure out how to put the capital together. They find a good lease or whatever, and they start and they'll get back into the restaurant business. But that's going to be a lot tougher for them to get started than it has been, for you to kind of rejuvenate yourself, make all these changes, and stay in business. Here's the changes in small business for the revenue for selected industries over time, and this really has to do with whether or not they're increasing or decreasing. Now, this particular one was just for the year in 2020, but the revenue in 2020 tended to be going down, and you can kind of see. But this, of course, has to do with what happened in 2020 in COVID. So I just sort of threw this in here so that you could see how bad some things are. So this is the leisure and hospitality industry, and you can see what happened to that. And it's interesting that this number in August of last year started faltering, and that hasn't recovered very much. So the cruise ships, the hotels, they're just not quite. And I think that I can't tell you whether or not normally restaurants are in the retail industry, so I don't think that's part of it. But you can see that you did have a lot of retail pain, and then of course other services. So
there's not one the 2021 yet. See how far it's going.
Yeah, and I don't have it. I haven't been able to find good stats for 2021. So here's how many employees that new companies have, depending on how long they've been in business. 60% have from 1 to 4 employees after the first year. make sure I'm reading it. Yeah, in the first 4 years. And then about 5.9%, or excuse me, about 20% have over 5 and less than 9 employees. And then 10% in 10 years, from 10 to 19 years, have about 10 to 19 employees. So 10 to 15 employees. So there you are, right there.
Yeah.
Right? So, and you're a labor-intensive business, and so you'd have a tendency to be hiring a lot more people. You're not as much of a labor-intensive business.
Yeah, I would say still, yeah.
You'd say so?
Yeah.
And how many employees do you have now?
We have 28.
28, okay. And you've been in business about 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here you are. Yeah, so only about 10% of the businesses have 28 employees.
Wow.
You know, so that just kind of gives you a sense. Businesses mostly stay small. They don't really when you get over, the breaks are when you're brand new by yourself, and then you go up to one full-time employee. So you're going from really a proprietorship into a really, really small business. And then you go up to about 5 employees in a small business. And then it jumps to about 10 and then about 20. So you can see there are these, and each one of those are like different businesses. When you get above 20, you stay pretty much the same until you get to 60, 70, 80, and up to 100. But the complexion of the business changes, the complexity of the business changes. So here we have the percentage distribution of private and sector employment by size of firm. And so this is kind of interesting because small businesses with from 1 to 249 employees. Now, keep in mind, most of us think a business with 250 employees is a pretty big sized business. And it is. It's a good sized business. So, but that's the small business definition, small business administration's definition. I really think that a small business probably turns into a pretty good sized business, like about 150 or 200, somewhere there. But even so, that's a pretty good sized business, over 100. And so you can see what's happened over the years, and that is that back in 1995, 6, 7, there were more businesses that were small than large. But look what's happened since then. The larger businesses are taking a larger and larger percent of all their employees. This is one reason that I started microjournals, because we need to stop the trend. We need more small businesses. We need more independent people. We're down to 46%, but we used to be up at about 51% traditionally for a long, long time. And we just don't need big businesses to take over the world.
It seems like it keeps going down.
It's on a downtrend. And we're going to see when it stretches out this far, a huge dip for 2020.
And the government policies kind of lean towards that way, don't it?
Government policies are leaning towards bigger business. What happens is they put in rules that big businesses can handle, and they forget about the little guys. And then we're left scrambling. It's like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do that? Well, like what we're dealing with right now. If you hit 100 employees, a sort of magic number. Now you've got this COVID vaccine issue. How many employees do you have that don't want a vaccine?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's like, that really brings it home, huh? It's like, wow, what if you had to fire them?
I believe that they have a new policy too of, I think it's 25 or more after your retirement for the employees.
It's changing to 5 and 2022, I believe. 5 and 20. You have to offer a retirement plan to your employees,
Yeah.
or they have to sign up to Cal Savers.
Or for Cal.
Yeah.
When did this happen?
I think 3 years ago, but they're going in big businesses all the way down to
Oh,
the
gee, I'll have to catch up on that.
I believe
They're bringing it down to 25.
Yeah.
and
Oh,
in 2 years
geez.
they're bringing it to 5.
Yeah.
Oh, it's terrible.
Or
It's not that hard, it's not that hard to do, really. We only had 12 employees for Red Fusion. And And we set up a retirement plan, and it's not, but I mean, your bookkeeper has to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of companies that are benefits companies that can help you set that up.
Mhm.
And I know a guy who's really good too. And you need to talk to somebody about benefits and stuff.
Okay.
It's been a 20 years. Let's see. Well, I don't think we want to read through all of that. So this was just something that was sort of interesting. The death one, and that is that death and disability are causing more businesses to close, and that's because so many businesses are owned by old people.
And that's what I was going to ask you.
Yes.
Do you believe that graph that goes down with employment also has to do with cultural changes?
Cultural, what kind of
Maybe
cultural?
boomers versus,
Yeah,
youth now?
a little bit.
The different
I
way
think
you guys
it's-
grew
I
up
think it's a
versus
little
after
bit.
growing up?
I think there are a lot of not particularly great old bosses that have had really good businesses, and they are used to being a dictator, and millennials, and on down don't really like that. So and so you have both. It goes both ways. You've got younger people saying, "I don't want to work for this old guy," and then you've got old guys going, "I can't get anybody to come and work for me," and so they just forget it, or they get a heart attack and they die. I don't know. So here we have a composition of owners by age, and you can see there are just a teeny weeny number of them who are 18 to 29, smaller than you might expect. It's a very small number. I was one of those weirdos who started my first business at age 20, and my second one at age 23. But it doesn't happen very often. Yeah. But so what happens is you usually have to have some money in order to get started in a business. And so by the time you get to be in your 30s, you have a little money, you can finally get started. But most businesses are started by 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds. This is pretty amazing. I mean, 35% of business owners are in their 50s. Some of them started over here when they were younger. So, and it takes about, when we go through and we take a look at wealth and who the really good small business people are as a profile. And I think you've been through that one. Haven't you guys heard that one?
Yeah, Millionaire Next Door.
Millionaire Next Door.
Okay.
Kind of thing. Yeah. So it takes most people, 10, 15, 20 years to really amass wealth. Just a lot of hard work. So here's the level of education of them. A lot of high school graduates, a couple with AAs, about 17%, and then about almost as many college people, which is sort of interesting because there are 4 or 5 times as many high school graduates as there are college graduates. Yet they can still, so therefore, as a percentage, college graduates start with businesses. I'm not sure why. And going to college does not make you successful in small business. So there's a little bit of a disconnect. Master's degrees, about 15%, which really surprises me. And then you've got a few of these weird doctoral candidates out here who decide to go into business. But I think those are mostly scientists and engineers.
That accidentally build a business?
Well, they like invent something,
Yeah.
and then somebody says, "Wow, this is the greatest thing. Let's build a business around it." That's what these guys are. Well, it's like the Griffins, both of them PhDs in mathematics, and they end up in a motor repair business.
The Fabrice, was it a scientist that invented it? Some marketer, at some point, I forgot the book you recommended me. I read something like that.
Oh yeah. Well, and there are quite a few people that are just these really smart guys that invent incredible stuff. And then race, we've got mostly white, which you may not be surprised about. These are older numbers, and Hispanic numbers are way, way, way up now. Not anything like this in the last 5 years. And the blacks are not that big. But then when you throw it, you've got this Asian Pacific, an islander group here. And of course, some of these things get mixed up and you've got multi-race. So in California, this is way high.
I thought I was gonna say, that doesn't seem, well, again,
No, it's not.
accurate, at least. if
It's
in
not
the Inland
California.
Empire.
No, no. I'd say Hispanics are opening more than half of the businesses. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's a very fertile place to be for opening business and getting things started. You know, and I don't know this, but I'm going to guess that it's exploded because we've got so many more second and third generation. That's what you think so. I think so too. Yeah.
I was
so-
born in
so
Mexico,
many.
still don't have my first generation, but you got the
Yeah, right. Marital status, and this is a big one, and that is that you know, the vast majority of small business people are married, and that's because if you go back and you take a look at the Millionaire Next Door, that's also true there. The millionaires are almost all married with families. That's now there are places where that's not the case. If you go to Palm Springs, you'll find that that's not exactly that way, but that's an unusual circumstance.
Ron, were they married before or after they became millionaires?
Oh, man.
That's a good question.
Well, see, if you become a millionaire, the chances of you getting married are much greater.
That's what I thought.
No, I don't think it matters if it's before. So it's just the reason is, and really good kind of question. The reason is not that being married makes any difference, because it doesn't. In some ways, it's like you have to pay attention to your spouse. But the reason that it matters is because once you get a little older and you have a family, it is a lot easier if one works their tail off and the other one takes care of everything else. That's kind of. But the other thing that happens, and I've had a lot of clients where it might have been started by the man, but the backbone is the wife. That really happens a lot, where they're in the background, but they're doing the accounting, they're doing a lot of the HR management, they're making sure everything is lined up and working right, while the husband is out doing the sales. That's not that uncommon. So
That's pretty common.
What, Ed? Say that again.
That's pretty common.
Yeah, you think
That's
so
very
too?
common.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That
that's
it
very
is.
common.
and now more and more, as we'll see how many, as we have the number of women who start businesses is really rising a lot now, and more, there are men that are in the same role where women start businesses and men do that. They don't necessarily have reversed roles in terms of the guy being the accountant's type, but they do something within the business that the wife is not as good at, and they just complement each other. And so the Millionaire Next Door thing is like, it really is like a whole family is there doing it. It's, and a lot of times the kids get involved, like you guys, and it becomes a family thing. And a lot of success can follow from that because, well, for one thing, you get a lot of slave labor. and that's really good for businesses when they're really little. I used to make my sons, pull cable, sweep out. You guys did that too, probably, right? You guys did all that. Yeah, you know what that's like. So, but that's good because you see what work is about. And today, where do you learn how to work if you don't have, if you're not working for a family business? It's really hard just to find it. When I was a kid, we could have a newspaper route. We could do all kinds of stuff. And nobody who got out of high school hadn't had a job. And now we get people who get out of college and never have a job. It's a totally different thing. And being able to understand how work works is really valuable. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, citizenship. You guys might find some of this interesting.
Oh, yes.
Natural born citizen, that's about 65%. Naturalized, about 17 or 18%. Permanent residents, about 12%. We've even got visa holders with businesses. And so those who are applying for permanent status, very small, but they're out there. Yeah.
The interesting part of this country is illegal to get a job here, but it's legal to start a business if you're foreign. So why not
Exactly.
start a business and earn good places?
Exactly. I mean, it's a little bit crazy. Well, it's easier to get citizenship if you invest money in the business in the country too. And then here's the difference in political parties. Democrats, you can see, are only about 16 or 17%. And Republicans are 35%, a lot of independents. But there are also a lot of people who don't want to declare apparently. This is interesting in a strange way. How many current business owners have a parent who's in a business? So only about 28, 30%. So not a whole lot. But what about grandparents? Well, about 10%. And when I read this, I realized I hadn't thought about it, but both of my grandparents had their own businesses, and so did my dad. So when you have both of them, you see that. But look at this: 15% of current business owners have had parents and grandparents that owned a business. Isn't that amazing? So it is sort of a family thing. And then you've got the rest of neither parents or grandparents own the business. Now, I don't know that there has anything to do with success here. It's just a raw demographics. Reasons that you start a business, and this is pretty much the same always. They're ready to be their own boss. But more than ready to be their own boss, many times it's like, it's not I'm ready to be my own boss. It's I don't really want to work for anybody. That's really kind of the reason, I think. And that's that independent spirit. So that's 25, 27%. Wanted to pursue a certain kind of a passion. That's the next biggest group, about 22, 23. That just came up. They had an opportunity to get into business. They decided to. And then down here, you had people who were dissatisfied with corporate America. Those who were laid off and had nothing else to do, apparently, and thought they'd get a better try. They're not ready to retire, or maybe a life event caused them to rechange it. So what are the most important issues to stay in business? As we talked about, running out of cash, don't do it. Market failure is number 2. No one would buy for the price or service level that they were offering. In other words, they thought there was a market, but when they got it out there and got started, they couldn't sell anything. And so failure to penetrate the market is one of the reasons you run out of cash, and therefore it's really the number one reason, which is what marketing positioning is about.
I can relate to that right now because we started with plenty of cash before we left Wells Fargo. We're pushing the 2-year mark, and that cash is not looking as pretty as it did 2 years ago.
Yeah, I imagine after 2 years of what we've been through too.
Market failure, I believe it's the opposite of what we have here. It's like we went to test the market every single time with the product. It's just I think the biggest issue is not knowing how to stay focused. It's costing a lot of cash to be wasted.
Yeah, and maybe not wasted, but used up.
Used up, yeah.
Because you have to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you can just stop eating. And so that's, you have to be realistic about it. So when you take a look at how long does it take to be able to get into business, I mean, sometimes it's extraordinarily long period of time. It could be 3, 4, 5, 6 years before you've got enough cash to say, oh, finally, we have enough cash to run the business and we can live on that. So when we go through the whole series of steps to decide whether or not you're going to go into business along with break even and some other analysis, one of those spin-offs is on a personal level, what do you need to live? So that's an important part of that. And that's why it's, so you're right, at least you've got market, you have a market that's interested in your product. Yeah. Okay, so that's sort of that deal. and thought it would be a little bit of a diversion. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I should say, we started with this chart right here. And I'm going to have to stop and reshare, I think. There we go. So when we had this, we've had sort of the discussion about what are the primary reasons a business failed? We know cash is number one, and then we know market issues are number two. You can open a restaurant, but if nobody comes and the cash register doesn't ring, it doesn't matter how nice the tables and chairs are. Like, doesn't matter. You got to get somebody in the restaurant. So what over several years of working on looking at markets that support small businesses, I came up with this set of charts, and let's make them a little bit bigger. These charts, we spent most of the time last time talking about them, and I'm not going to spend much time now, other than just to say they measure the age of the market. And so when you take a look at restaurants, they're all mature. We've had restaurants a long time, so there's not too much that's new about that. When we take a look at your kind of industrial cleanup stuff, it's probably right in the middle here. It's not a brand new business, but we didn't have this in the 70s and 80s. I mean, that's why we had polluted rivers and all kinds of things were not as great in those days. You don't really know about it because we solved the problems, partially because companies like you came. So it's kind of in the mid, because I feel like, without studying the market, I feel like there's still huge opportunity for cleanup. We're going to EPA is still going to be tough. We're going to be cleaning the air and doing a lot of other cleanup too. So we're somewhere in the middle. So you've got a broad range of this maturity kind of graph where you start off, takes a long, meanwhile, Edgar, you're down here.
I think so.
I think you're about ready to come up into here, right here where you start growing. But you've been educating people about who you are. You've been developing business. It takes a long time. And so this is where we were, when we started Red Fusion, the internet business was down here, and it took us 3 or 4 years before people even knew what a website was. So we did nothing but educate. And then, of course, now we're way up here. It's like way mature. So, and that happened over 20 years. This market, this one right here, indicates whether you're a big fish, the number one in the market, number two, or number three in the market. This one over here is really whether or not the kind of customer composition you have. So on one end, you have no competition to speak of. You're sort of there. You have some competition.
Depends on the location.
Yeah, but you don't have like dozens of people.
Yeah.
Then on the other hand, you've got competition everywhere. So you'd be over on the other end here. And then you have these other two dimensions, which is, what is it, a transactional business or a relational business? Relational business means you have an awful lot of interpersonal contact with people. Yours is a relationship business. Attorneys and lawyers are relationship businesses. Transactional businesses are really, they come in, they buy a couple of meals and then they leave, but you don't ever really know them. Now over time, you get to know some of your customers, the recurring ones, and it becomes relational, and that cements them to the restaurant. So you can be somewhere, in the middle, but you're not going to be all the way up here, but you're certainly not going to be highly relational. They're going to come in for the food, not because they like you. They might come in because both. But if the food's not very good, they're probably going to go, I like them, but I'm not going to like them. Not that. This chart right here is a way to look at whether or not you are creating value in the eyes of the customer And then this one over here really is about whether or not you score highly on this, on quality, and highly on this scale here, which is number one, number two, or number three in your marketplace. Sometimes this is hard to measure. You can measure this. You probably cannot measure this because it's hard to know what distance your geography is. I mean, you can learn that by gathering customer information, and it's hard to know which, you can tell which customers are in that, what restaurants are in that geography, but it's hard to know how far people have driven and how often they come back, so that you can determine if you're really number one or number two or number three. That's very difficult to determine. But you can try. Okay, so what I thought we'd do here, let's go through this automation thing right now. So that's where you want to be in each one of these cases. And then finally, so what happens, where do you want to be? So we take these same measures in the market and say, okay, here's where a customer is. Well, let's see, that's ideal. Yeah, this is ideal. In terms of customers, you want about 80% of your customers to generate, 20% of your customers to generate 80% of your business. That's sort of the average. Not true in your business because you have everybody buys the same amount of meals. You have 4 meals every time someone sits down. They range a little bit in terms of the amount of business they give you. But for the most part, they buy about the same thing, and you have a whole lot of customers. I'm going to guess you would be more like 30% of your customers or 40% of your customers create 80% of your business, somewhere in that range. So what that means is you have a lot more people who are more important to you. Now, in your case, you're probably 80-20 or 10-90, where you have your top 10 customers probably do the 80 or 90%.
Yeah.
Because they have the ability to spend a huge amount of money. And so, when you're in that sort of the industrial side, you've got a few customers that really matter, and then a bunch of them don't matter as much. So that changes the way your strategy thinking goes. Like, okay, what's our customer service really going to be like? Who are we going to really target? How many, are we going to put sales representatives attached to certain ones or not, or just kind of let inside sales handle those kinds of decisions? So then under market type, whether you're high or low intensity, that really has to do with how many customers you have. You want to be low. You want to be as low as possible. You're pretty low. You're on the medium high probably. And because yours is a brand new business, you're low. There's not a lot of competition in your way there. Yeah. And their competition or leadership, this is in the marketplace, whether you want to be number one, number two, and three, et cetera. You want to be number one. That's because when you're number one in the marketplace, you're able to get more margin per customer. So when you look back at this chart, that pushes you up. And this chart is pretty wild. This basically says how much margin you can make off of each customer. So that means that your prices can be higher while you're delivering the same raw cost product. That's because they have higher loyalty. They like your quality better. And so when you can manage to do that, your margins go up and your profit goes up substantially. Like goes from here at 3% return on investment, from here to 15. So this is a huge multiple. So somebody is earning $1 on one customer, and somebody else is earning $10. Well, you have a lot more money. That's money you can grab a hold of. You can either keep it and pay tax. Well, you're going to pay taxes on it, but you can buy equipment with it. You can put it back into growing your customers. You can increase your quality. You can spend that money and make your business a lot better if you're not making that much money, and you have just as many customers, you're only getting a buck, you don't have much money left to do anything. I mean, it's like, gee, we're running hard, we're working hard, but we're not making much money. So that's why that's an important measure. So you want to be the leader if you can. It's really hard to do. Almost nobody can be the leader when in small business. About the only way you can be the leader is to be in such a micro niche that almost nobody else is competing with. And therefore, that's why I wrote the book about exactly that subject. Finding your crack in the market, and that's what we did at Red Fusion. We made sure that we were so small, geographically and in terms of offerings, that we had to be number one because there wasn't a competition.
I want to throw a testimony over here, but I think thanks to all these lessons, we found our micro niche or market. We focus specifically on Latino, Mexican, hopefully owned restaurants with Spanish speakers.
Right, exactly. And so really penetrating into that. And so what that means to him is he puts himself in this spot. What it means to you is he's got more expertise in this than anybody, because nobody else is going to really focus on it. I mean, there might be, but it'd be very difficult to find somebody that is so focused on that. Yeah. The PMS chart, quality versus leadership, we talked about, and you want to be very high, obviously, as opposed to very low. And perceived value, you want to be, this is the value diamond, you want to be conceived and perceived as a top performer, obviously, instead of having certain deficiencies. And then market maturity, which we didn't talk about, obviously, the more finely tuned your marketing is, the better you're going to be. And Hannah, that's where you're going to be in terms of your customers, is helping them understand you're really good at that, and they need to have you because they're down here under unorganized. Most of my clients are all unorganized. There are not very many companies that are even mature in marketing. It's really rare, and we'd have to talk another time about what that means. But so here I wanted to show you as sort of an example. This right here is a real, actual, pretty good sized client, and this is where they are. So you can see when you compare these two, it's like, this is where we want to be. This is where we are.
And how do you guys determine that they were there? It was based on what data? How do you guys find
Well, we can actually do the calculations on the Pareto principle. We do a customer analysis on that. We take a look at a competitive analysis on the second one.
Okay.
How many other companies do what they do, and it's not that hard to figure out. And in this case, there are a whole bunch of them. Under competition and leadership, that is a little harder to do, but many times in larger companies, they know that company X is the largest competitor, and company Y is a little bit smaller than them. They can identify 3 or 4 companies that are bigger than them, that are direct competitors. So it's not that hard to get down to 4 or below. In fact, it's mostly common. That's where most businesses really are. Under the PIMS chart, they were performing pretty low with reasonably low margins, and the perceived value was that people were not buying them because they didn't have the quality, they didn't have the service wasn't very good. They just they're just behind the curve on a whole bunch of things. And in marketing maturity, they had so little to market that it made it tough for them to figure out. In other words, when you don't have real attributes to sell, real ones, like quality, it means that the more and more and more marketing you do, the more of a lie you have. You can't lie to people. You have to give them what you actually have and charge them a real price. Because if you lie to them, they figure it out pretty fast. So, you never, ever, ever want to give somebody less than you promised them, And you always want to deliver the highest quality that you
You
possibly
get sued for
can.
that too, right? Relying like in your marketing.
Yeah, well, I mean, your marketing goes both ways. You can actually you can increase the impression people have of your meals by doing good marketing. Because when you plant it in their head the right way, it's amazing how different they'll think about your food. It's really true. We have all kinds of tests on that subject, and both from psychology and even neuroscience today. We just have all kinds of evidence that shows that brand really has a big a part to play, especially in food. And like, think of perfume, in the jewelry business. I mean, all that impression in Gucci and those kind of companies, that's all that's now. Gucci is also one of the finest, say, handbags you can possibly buy. But they also, well, I mean,
Oh, no, I'm saying no, as in like, yes, it is. I didn't mean to
Yeah,
say
it
like
is.
that. But the price is being charged
But-
is
but
not
you
where
pay.
you need. Yeah.
you pay for it. You really pay for it.
Yeah.
And so it was like somebody, used to be years and years ago, I was in the men's clothing business. I mean, not myself, but I had clients in the men's clothing business. And that was a lot of our business. And so you'd go in and you'd say, I don't know what prices are anymore. I haven't bought a suit in years. But say it used to be, you could get a decent suit for $300. And the quality was pretty good, and you didn't look like like a piece of trash on. You looked pretty good. But then you could also buy something that looks really, really good for $3,000. Hugo Boss and a lot of that stuff. Well, so was it really 10 times better? No, not in terms of quality anyway. Now, in terms of fashion, maybe some people thought it was better. It'd be like, okay, a Ferrari looks a little bit better than a lot of other cars. So that's what you're buying, is you're buying the look and the feel and maybe the horsepower and that kind of thing and the way it drives. And in a suit, you might be buying the fact that it's tailored a little bit better. But it's so small, not very many of us can even know the difference. You have to study it to figure out what these high thread counts are, like in sheets or in the fabric, or how many stitches per inch. And all of that stuff is there, but will it last longer? Yeah, maybe it will. It'll be out of fashion by the time it wears out anyway,
Is in your graph in that scenario, because I know last time I kind of remember you said that that's not technically image. That might fall under. You have one of your graphs.
Oh, well, yeah, when you're talking about quality,
Well, you have the quality and then
quality, image, service,
Image.
and price.
quality and image.
Yeah. Yeah.
So same quality, just different image. When it comes to-
Same quality, different image, right.
The like a guy went to Italy, bought a suit from Italy,
Right.
and spent less money on buying the plane and somebody making the suit than actually buying a genuine leather. I saw that commercial after you talked about it, but
Yeah.
found
Right.
something about them really interesting to show the example.
Yeah.
But what I was confused was same quality, right? Say the suit from Italy and the one you bought for $5,000 here, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
the image that's worth the $5,000. They paid a lot of money to build their image up, right? That's
Yeah.
what you mean. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's an interesting play on so what do you pay for and what do you get? And it's really important in a restaurant business.
Oh yeah, I was hearing like something too. It's like we grab this cup of water, but why not make that cup fancier and everything with the same water just to get an extra coffee on
That's right.
it? Yeah.
And that's exactly right. You put a lemon in or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a little bit
And
fancy.
you get a real glass as opposed to a plastic glass.
Yeah, it could be the same water, just make it a little
It's the
bit
same
fancy.
water.
Can I
Yeah.
give a genuine example? Maybe like a michelada that's inside a cup. Or just put 3 little shrimps on top of it with the lime on top of it, and all of a sudden the michelada image just went up.
That's right.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
Does
exactly
that make
right.
sense?
No, I feel you.
Okay.
Yeah.
They do that.
And so, and so now you have to always remember your clientele.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, you know, there will be some customers, if you get it too fancy, there'll be customers that kind of go, gee, you know, that's probably more expensive than I need to pay for. I just wanted a burrito.
Yeah,
I just wanted to eat. I don't need to have all the fancy stuff on it. You know, then they might go, oh, this might cost me $2 more than another place.
yeah, and people get mad over $1. You raise
Oh.
like $1 up.
Oh,
they get
yeah,
mad at you.
yeah,
It's like,
yes,
chill.
exactly. And man, are you going to have a problem in the future on that? I mean, inflation today went up to the highest level in 30 years, 5.6%.
And I feel like they're masking, oh, it only went up this much, but they only seem to choose to report whatever.
Well, it depends on who you listen to. If you listen to CNN, it's like, oh, it's not that bad.
It's not that bad,
But
but
you listen to Fox, and it's like, that's the highest in 30 years, guys. Here are the facts.
So where, did you believe in the Fox News being a little more accurate, or they?
I do believe it.
Okay. I always wonder. I always try to stick in the middle, both of them.
Well, CNN to me is just a propaganda machine.
Yeah.
You know, the regular news stations, they're not as bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, ABC, NBC, that kind of thing. But it just feels like when it gets political, and you know, Fox can be criticized for the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They bring in conservative experts, and then you get the liberal experts on the other side. But the part that bothers me is that there are stories that I'll mention to friends and they've not even heard about because they're listening to mainstream television. Of course, you guys don't listen to TV news anyway, do you?
No, you just
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
back to you too.
yeah. So that's old-fashioned stuff.
What is it?
Well,
What is TV?
Yeah, and the truth is that television news is becoming irrelevant. And so, in TV, in many ways, is becoming irrelevant, especially in the Inland Empire. It's never been relevant. So, you know, about the time some guy walks in trying to sell you TV ads, you can just say, sorry, I mean, no. Yeah, I mean, not in the Inland Empire, because, you know, the only stations we have are Los Angeles. So I mean, we are completely irrelevant to Los Angeles here. So we've always had this media problem. Where do you find media that you can actually reach our actual citizens in the Inland Empire? And that makes it tough. So, okay, so I thought then I would bring you finally just to show you where the highest profit and wealth creators are in my group of clients. And so you can see that they are all in most of these care areas, they're number one or number two in terms of the measures. So you can pretty well be assured that if your business fits into these particular market characteristics, you are going to be successful.
The reason you have that red sign versus the yellow, what's the meaning of the color?
Let's see. Oh, in this particular case, the yellow, I don't know why I changed the color.
Okay.
The yellow or the preferred in both of these cases, and then the red is preferred here. I should have made that green.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So yeah, so you want to be as best positioned as you possibly can be in these areas, and so therefore you end up. I think that's it. Yeah, I won't pass on this one. Oh, I'll just explain this. So when we take a look at a particular company, which might be this blue dot, and then we compare all of the companies around it. And so this might be the size of revenue, so these are bigger ones. And then you might have the specialty over here. So the more highly specialized they are, they end up going further away over here. And so you can see that this particular business is like in the middle. They're in the middle of specialty to general. They're in the middle of revenue. And they're like in no man's land. It's just, how are you going to stand out if you're in the middle of all of this mess? What are you going to do to make yourself a little bit better? Then you've got this green guy down here who's very small, and they're very general. And it's like they're effectively dead. They're just waiting to die. They're going to be one of those companies that is just going to go out of business because there's nothing going on in the market. Nothing. Now, I don't know how many of you read the Wall Street Journal, but I would recommend that. And one of the oldest respected companies in the United States announced, General Electric, announced they're breaking into 3 companies today. So they've given up the ghost. I mean, these are the people that have been in electricity.
What's the reason?
It's been poorly managed for about 10 or 15 years. And what did they do? Number one, they diversified into everything under the sun. And they thought that their highly acclaimed management school could teach all of their people how to run a business more effectively than anybody else could. And so it didn't matter that they were in appliances and they were in plastics and they were in aviation. They were in so many different businesses, I mean, completely different businesses. In the 80s, there was a trend of consolidation. And so one company would buy 3 or 4 companies and they just keep gobbling them up and gobbling them up and up. And they became these diversified companies with all these different businesses. So what it does is it really proves that even if you're a big company and you have market power in an individual industry, when you take your focus at the top, the decision makers, take their focus off of their core business, you can still fail.
I feel like Sony is like reminds me of General Electric.
Sony is a lot like them. Mitsubishi is like them. Samsung is like them. You know, they're just in all of these businesses. And you just wonder how in the world can they do this?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I looked at Sony's profit one. I don't know how it did. It was like,
Well, Sony has had a weird guy at the helm for a while too. So, and I think they had him in jail for a while. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know about the Korean laws or anything. You know. But, so my point is that you want to be in a defined place in your market, so where you can really make some money and be successful. And so that makes marketing awfully important. So there is that. We'll wrap that. Okay. So we got a few minutes to chat. And I'm really interested. Hey, can you guys hear the conversation here in the room very well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's great. So Hannah, I'd like to hear any comments you might have about marketing.
Yes, I have a burning question I was confronted with today.
Okay.
I'm working on a proposal and asked a group of people, what would exceed your expectations in a marketing proposal?
Mhm.
And somebody said to see the return on investment in the bottom line. Nobody does that.
Wow.
So
I don't think I've ever had that happen.
how do you do that? Not as in paid advertisement with organic. Is it even possible right now?
Well, it's pretty impossible. And so here's the problem is you can't anticipate the return on investment
Right.
for a couple of reasons. And one of them is that now they may be thinking of something a little different than return on investment. They may be thinking more, say, closes per dollar or something like that. There are a lot of newspaper and advertising people who use the term return on investment, but they are never talking about bottom line profit for the money invested in the media. They're talking more about, I invested X amount of dollars in a local newspaper. How many new customers did I get? So that's what they're meaning is, I think, the return on investment. So it makes it a little easier to answer. The problem, of course, again, is that measuring it is very difficult to do in most media. It's a lot easier to do in digital media. So I don't know if you're doing a digital proposal or what kind of a proposal you're doing, but if in fact you, for instance, if you were doing a Google AdWords proposal, then what you would do is you would ask for access to their Google Analytics,
Mm,
which might impress them. They might not want to give it to you.
mm,
And then you would also make sure that they have a customer feedback mechanism where they're asking people, where did you hear about us? Give them two or three options to check off, and then you can attempt to identify where that came from.
yeah.
If it's an online type of business, it's a lot easier to do because people remember that they just did a Google search or they just saw a Google ad and they click on it and now they're in some sort of a purchase portal, and therefore you can track that sometimes.
Right.
But you can also just ask them, as they're filling out the order form, where did you hear about us? So
Right.
that's how you can identify and measure it. But I have never seen any sort of rules of thumb on how effective this stuff is in terms of actually getting customers.
Right.
There are some, I mean, you can get some Google stats, but they're so broad that you can't apply them to a small business.
Mm.
Then here's the other side of things, and I always told prospects when they get sort of tough like that, which I think is fine. I always found it challenging. I
Right.
always would say to them, because people would say, "Gee, you talk a good game. Can you guarantee performance?"
Mm.
And I would say, "Well, if I had complete control of your business, I could. But you won't. You're not going to give me that.
Right.
You're gonna run your own business the way you want to.
Mm.
You're gonna set up your own customer service group. You got your own salespeople, and all of those guys have to perform at exactly the right level, or everything we do won't work.
Right.
And therefore, because I can't control that, I can't guarantee that anything is going to work for you. So that's kind of where you give them a little pushback. And you
Right.
say, I can't guarantee that you'll do a good job. Can you guarantee me the quality of your product? Can you guarantee me the customer service of your product? Can you guarantee me that your prices are going to be competitive? And if you can do all of that, then maybe we could have more of a conversation. But for the most part, you can't do that. And therefore, I can't guarantee you a return on investment either. But I can measure it for you in these limited ways. And together, we will find out how it works earlier than anybody else. And we'll fix it earlier than anybody else. Because it's not about knowing what to do, which is what media salesmen say to your client. It's really about adjusting to what works. That's why good marketing systems work. It's because you adjust it. I don't think I've ever built a plan that I knew would work absolutely. But I always built them with enough flex in them so that the multimedia part of it would show where it's working and where it's not working, and then we would make adjustments to the budget.
I have a question for Hannah.
Yes.
What type of business is it?
The business that I'm creating a new proposal for is an IT company. Now, that wasn't the person who suggested I input that information. I was just asking a group of people. And what's interesting, it's actually one of my current clients who said that. Yikes. But he's very big on return on investment. So any conversation we have is most likely around that.
So one thing that we deal with is perceived value. I try to focus on perceived value and not actual return on investment, because before they met me, they never would have had the type of assets, which is the media that we provided for them, whether I was involved with them or not. And so say we only get one client a month, but he also has a video that we could utilize for other things if I don't want to do certain things for them. So what I try to tell them is, we're about to measure. We're going to measure as much things as we can. Together, we're going to look at the data, and we're going to determine if for you it's perceived value, even though I believe it is a good return on investment, but it's I can't control his mindset to the point where if I'm already doing everything I can and I know it's working, and he still wants to see a dollar amount, the amount of work I'm putting towards it. And at a certain point, if I get to that level where if I spend more time trying to like convince him that it's working, I might even let him go as a customer. But if it's one of those things where like this is what I've done, this is what it was before, and this is what it is now, and this is because you're working with me. You put a value to that, kind of like goodwill in accounting. That's kind of where I try to focus on. Like you understand goodwill in accounting, I might be in the beginning, if I'm not able to mention something, think of it as goodwill.
Yeah.
I don't know if that kind of helped you, made any sense.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you both for your input. Someone shared with me earlier today, time is not money, time is value. It's an asset that you never get back. I thought that was very well said.
Yeah, right. Yeah, very good. Any other comments, questions about what we're talking about here?
What a small business like us can do is that we just self-assess each other to try to figure it out if we're in that ideal 80-20 concept. We're so small. I mean, is there any advice you can give us? Because I know we could use how many customers are available.
The 80-20 is not as hard and fast of a rule as the other ones. And the reason is that there are businesses that are pretty successful that are very flat in terms of how much business they do per customer. For instance, if you had a hot dog stand at an airport, you have new customers rolling through there all the time, and they're all spending $5. So you're not going to have 80-20 in that situation at all. So it depends on the industry. But what it does is that when you do that first measurement, it helps you understand vulnerabilities among your customer base. And so when it moves a little bit over time, that's when you get concerned. Ed and I were working with a company that has gone slowly from about 75, it's about 25% of their business provides 80% of their customers. Now it's more like 10% of their customers provide 90% of their business. So what's happened is that the big businesses have given them a lot more business. The smaller ones have been choked out because they don't have enough capacity, and therefore they've altered their mix of customers. So ideally, what you'd want to do is you don't want to get rid of the big ones unless you're losing money on them. You want to get more new big ones and replace the little ones if that's kind of the composition of your business. And so, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule as to how to do that, but you do want to understand if you're moving in the wrong direction, and they are. You don't really want to move into a one customer controls all your business. That's ultimately that's where you go. Is you've got, and I've seen that. Sears used to use that as a competitive tool. They would go buy up 50% of some manufacturer's capacity, say in dishwashers, and then it would go to 60, and then it would go to 80, and then they would threaten to cancel the order, and they'd buy the company. They'd say, well, we want all your production. Why don't we just buy you? And they did that all the time.
They had and they couldn't do anything about it. The whole business was controlled by identity.
Yeah, they would have been out of business anyway. So you don't let one big guy come and take control of your business. Yeah. Good stuff. So, Ed, do you have any comments?
It's a great program, Ron. I love this marketing stuff. It's just phenomenal. I think the hardest part is when you start a business, how do you know there's a market? Because when you start a business, you're shelling out $300,000 rent and investment and franchise fees, etc. How do you know when you open the door, there's going to be customers?
Well, that's where you do all the market study ahead of time. And if you know what the product is going to be, then you go through, and you're going to spend $300,000 to start up. You're going to go through the process of test marketing your product. So you test market it on people who you think are your likely customers, and you find out how they like it. So you get a general test market kind of feedback, and that can be very helpful. With the dairy, even though we're already established with the dairy, but every new product gets test marketed. So we're doing a new coffee right now. It's a cold brew coffee with certain amount of milk and cream in it and so forth. And so they send that they send out an email and they ask how many people would like to try a free sample. And so they'll deliver maybe 1,000 free samples, and then for receiving the free sample, they fill out a survey, and the survey comes back, and we ask questions like, the taste, and was it too sweet, and a whole bunch of things. And then we compare that to a lot of other surveys that we've had in the past. So we've gotten this down to the point to where we can almost guarantee the success of a product before we ever release it. But that's a known group of customers and a known business, et cetera. So it's a lot harder when you are in brand new business. You don't, and if your product is somewhat unique and different, and you have some differentiators on your product that set you apart from everybody else, which is what I've been preaching about, then that's a much harder kind of thing to do, but you still do have an opportunity to go out and try to test it. Another way to do that is to go to shows, to in industry trade shows, and set up a table and see what kind of conversation you have about a certain product. That's assuming you don't have intellectual property that you would lose by doing that, of course. That makes it much more difficult if you do have intellectual property and you want to sneak into the market. And then a lot of it comes down to judgment as to, well, what was our response, et cetera. And then the final piece to that is, okay, of the ones who had a decent response, who were they? What was their demographic? What was their psychographic, their behavioral profile? And if you can identify their behavioral profile, and then you see that there's a pattern, which there almost always is a pattern, then you can go to companies like Experian and you can buy the data to tell you how many more there are. And then so you make a very intelligent guess on whether or not your market exists before you open up. But there's a lot of risk. Obviously, there's a lot of risk.
Going back to your first, being number one and number two in the market is really important. You see these coffee places opening up. They're going up against a giant in Starbucks.
Yeah.
Where are they trying to be?
They're just thinking that they're going to be the best barista around, and they're going to be able to out barista the baristas. And of course, that's probably not going to happen. If it's a really small shop and you've got somebody with a personality, you can build a business based on personality in coffee.
Yeah.
So you take an interest in those people. But one of the best lessons is just to go back to Starbucks and ask the question, how in the world did they do it? Because their competition was every coffee shop in America. And when forgotten the guy's name, but when he went to Europe and he saw those wonderful coffee shops in the Champs-Élysées in Paris and in Rome and all throughout the Mediterranean, and he said, "Oh my gosh, these guys have great coffee. We ought to have great coffee like this. How can we do this?" Well, what they did is they created an environment that you walked into, and it was so different. It's hard to imagine now, but if you go back however many years, 20 or 30 years, there was nothing like that. You had really nice, clean architecture. You had these overstuffed chairs. You had atmosphere. You never went into a place that had that. They all had dumpy old chrome chairs and, you know, tables that are worn out. That's how you used to get your coffee, right?
Yeah,
So, I mean,
Yeah.
so I mean, they literally created an entire ecosystem to drink coffee that was a little bit better than a regular old coffee shop that served, you know, mud. So they changed the whole thing. Now, how did they know that there was a market? He just had a feeling about it, and he had enough money to open 2 or 3. They did real well, and the rest is history. I mean, so part of it is these kinds of ideas. A lot of it comes from individual research and a feeling that the market was there by somebody who has their fingers on the pulse. When I was in the fashion business, I had to have my fingers on the pulse all the time. That's why I took 8 or 10 trips a year to. I was in Denver. You know, we would go to Hollywood, and we would go to New York City, and we would go to Dallas. We would go all over the country. And every single time we did that, not only did we go to the trade show, we went to the hottest stores in town. And that's how we developed that feeling that our next season was going to be translated into Colorado. Our next season was going to be like this or like that. And then you put your money down and you take your chances.
I think trading, I've been blessed that there's not a lot of competition, which allows me to find people, right, like your father, that gives me the opportunity to become kind of a test subject to test the market.
Yeah.
And so we have 3 or 4 restaurants that give us the freedom to test the markets. Go ahead
And you have
try it out.
Yeah, right. And so sometimes in a way it may not be 300,000, but in a way you starting that business is your test market. So the question is, Ed, you know, how big of a business can it be? You know, if it could be a $300,000 business and you got to put 300,000 in, you know, but if it can be a $300 million business and it costs you 300,000, okay, maybe that's worth the risk. So you just now you're into weighing money and its value to you and how much investment you have, whether or not you need to go outside to get investment, whether you can sell your concept outside, you know, to people who have the money to help you, because that's what capital is for. Try these ideas out. That's what is so amazing about capitalism, is that it puts money in the area and the hands of people who have the ideas, who can justify the ideas and potential return on investment. And one of the things that this article said about GE this morning was quite interesting. And that was that because all of these competing businesses were in the same company, they didn't have a free flow of capital. So the money couldn't go from one good business to another because some controller at the top was saying, no, you got to do it this way, you got to do it this way. Some of those businesses needed more money and others had cash to throw off. And somebody was making a decision that was not a market decision. And therefore, they ran out of internal capital to invest. That's weird.
I see a market opportunity to build the East Coast Starbucks of the Inland Empire, because when you go eat at that place, it feels like the world is about to end and people are like grabbing all the toilet paper from the racks. Doesn't it feel like that at your guys' restaurant? I figured it was like you got people driving an hour, 2 hours to go get your guys' East Coast.
Man, we've had people from Arizona, Texas come all the way over there.
Wow.
It's
Yeah, because they tell me, they're like, yeah, we just came from Arizona or San Francisco and stuff. I'm just like, oh, like, thanks for coming.
Well, yeah.
So can we build a Starbucks with their East Coast style, and you drive through and you walk out and you chill out?
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Yeah.
Just kidding on that one. Robert has a question.
Robert, did you have a question? Do you want to just talk?
Chat. Look at the chat. I don't know why it's TV.
Here we go. The beginning part about the local coffee shop, hoping they can out barista the others. Now, I said that. It sounded to me like you're saying that if you aren't planning on being the next Starbucks or McDonald's, etc., that it's not worth getting into. Well, Robert, I didn't really mean that. I just was kind of saying that if you think you're going to out barista Starbucks, you better be really, really good at being a barista. You better add some twists and some turns, and I don't know what it would be, but you better have some other ideas because just serving the coffee isn't going to get it done.
Well, okay, so I guess what I'm asking is there no reason to think you can, your goal or your dream to be a local provider or something, is that not something that's realistic? I mean, meaning there's plenty of restaurants out there that have no ambitions of opening up, a chain of 10,000 McDonald's around the world, but you got plenty of restaurants that do fine and have been there for decades, like the one Edgar deals with that he just mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I don't really want to say that if you can't do that, you shouldn't open. I think there are lots of opportunities for businesses that are doing things like other people, like restaurants. So lots of opportunities to make that work, but it still comes down to looking at the niche. And so, if you want to open a coffee shop, then one of the best things to do is simply to take a look at the geography and get the best location. And sometimes it's hard to find the best location, of course. But if you're in a place where there's no Starbucks and you find a good location and you've got X number of people around it and so many people going up and down the street and you can get the counts for that, then it's really an issue of, well, okay, how many of them can I trek inside? And if I do a good enough service and a good enough product, can I get some of those people who are coming in, who are going down the street? And the answer may well be yes. So you don't have to be, you don't have to compete with Starbucks. And so you specifically don't compete with Starbucks. I guess that's what I'm saying is that your niche is now outside of Starbucks realm. You do something that is different than and or not in their, in their backyard.
And there's something you said a long time ago, Ron, that I thought was pretty. You still have a business that would at least support your own life, right? Like your income and make enough to be kind of like a self-employment job, but
Sure.
be healthy enough where you can, make enough money. Right. If you're doing that to be self-employed, then it's still okay. It's still within the category of business, but it is
Right.
It is, I guess, now almost different enough where you just have to be aware that that's what you have, right?
Yeah. And there are a lot of people. One of the three consulting amigos, Ray Anderson, has said for many, many years that a whole lot of businesses really are just paying. They just have created a job for themselves, as if, not a derogatory way, but as if that's not enough. I think it is enough. If you just want to make a living at doing something that you enjoy doing, there's not a thing in the world wrong with doing that. So, but you also, in that endeavor, you don't want to invest money in something that is going to be a loser. You don't have to reach for the stars and try to create, a huge business. And sometimes you don't really want to do that. But you also don't want to just make almost as much money as you used to, working 60 hours a week, and end up with a business that isn't worth anything at the end. So there's a mix there in terms of selecting that business that you want to be in. I kind of have the attitude, I've had both in my life. When I was in the retail business, I wanted to be as big and grow as fast and be as powerful as it could possibly be, to the point to where I pushed it too hard, actually. I figured out how to make money in that business, and also in small manufacturing business. When I went into consulting, I did just want a job for myself. I already knew how to make money, and I wasn't interested in making. I wanted to make a living, I didn't really want to make a whole bunch of money. I'm not sure if that was so smart, actually. I've had a really good time, and and I have a nice standard of living, so I'm not complaining at all. And a lot of Ed's insights have been very interesting, because when he talks about creating real value from a financial perspective, real value in your business, so that you can get it ready to sell. I remember this one guy I knew years ago when he said the time to start thinking about selling your business is the day you open your business. I think there's a lot of truth to that. And so it's like, well, if you're going to have a business, why not consider it seriously enough to make a living, and then do the little bit of extra smart stuff it takes to grow it into a little bit bigger business and a little bit bigger business. It's like, why not? I think I've missed a lot of opportunities by not following Ed's advice and turning it into a bigger business.
Edgar has a great idea at his place of business. And it's having all those file cabinets, and he's doing mail. It's giving people an address, a business address. I think that is really a great idea. And the question is, how could you scale that and really make something out of it? And how much money would you need to do that?
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's a good question. That is, once you get to the point to think where you feel like you've got a business, then the other issue you don't want to forget about is, how does it scale? My business, my consulting business doesn't scale at all.
Yeah. Edgar's idea would scale,
Yeah.
but is Edgar thinking about it? Is Edgar on the call?
Yeah,
Yes, I'm definitely thinking of scaling it. It's the fear.
There he is.
The fear of the expertise, or the bandwidth, or losing focus on it's, I guess it's the only thing that's holding me back is I spent all my time and cash testing 3 or 4 or 5 different business ideas and markets, and we have to choose one and stick with it. Otherwise, we're going to keep creating markets and never test them out, or actually launch them. Actually, not necessarily test them, because I think we tested it with 3 or 4 clients almost every single time, and somehow we got something out of all of them.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing was we don't want to run out of cash. I think it was a cash flow thing. And we have all these, rent here, we have software to run that, we're paying all these bills to create all these markets. The biggest issue was, well, choose one already and stick with it, right? You guys got a taste of almost all the stuff that we were doing, from TVs down to the POS systems, right?
Yeah.
But we need to stick with one, otherwise, we're going to run out of cash. So we chose the one with the least amount of assets necessary, so we don't run out of cash anymore.
Yeah.
We go out there and get some cash, and eventually maybe go back to this business model. But I think the only reason I haven't done 100% with this is because we already had something else we thought would be less amount of work.
Yeah.
For the amount of cash we could potentially receive.
Well, but it still gives you a really nice package for startups.
Yeah.
It's a terrific package. So it's because you can get all these pieces going, and then and help them, without necessarily a huge intensity, so that you can focus on the other pieces, which will eventually all come together.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll all come back together. So,
And that's what we figured is like, okay, we have 5 different pieces which all connect eventually, right?
yeah,
They kind of, with your guys' business, they connected all at once, right? We started with only the video and then the online ordering, and then all of a sudden the trust was built, and your father came and says, I want you to do everything now. And I was like, oh, okay.
yeah.
And so, we have to put a lot of stuff in parking lots because we had an opportunity to test it in the market.
I have not ever run into anybody, Edgar, that has so many good ideas.
Thank you.
But the problem is,
About maybe
how do you prioritize those and the big ones going? You may have your number one priority that's so big but you get tied up in everything else, you'll never get that thing launched.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it seems like that one there in particular has a lot of legs.
Yeah.
So what do we got to do to really get it going?
Let's talk, Edward.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. And the scaling idea, I think, is a good one. And you build models
Yeah.
to, on spreadsheets in order to be able to take a look at what that's.
Yeah, we should build those models and see what type of potential.
What kind of potential, what kind of
And
investment is required.
is that need everywhere, Edgar? Do you think everywhere is that need to have people starting businesses that need an address?
I think yes, at least in the Mexican culture, because where we come from, privacy is worth your life.
Mm.
And when you come here, you kind of don't forget that. Here, you can be more free without your privacy, and you'll be okay. But privacy is everything. So if you can avoid telling everybody where you live in California, you expose yourself so much. I believe at least with the Mexican market, the perceived value is privacy, not necessarily physical address.
And also, a lot has happened. We used to have a lot of these semi-concepts that had to do with mail.
Mm-hmm.
But UPS has come along and put a lot of those guys out of business.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see UPS stores having mail slots.
Mm-hmm.
See, so, now we're addresses. But meanwhile, the postal annex and those guys are out of business because the complexion changed.
It's the fact that within six to 500 square feet, you can fit 60 businesses and legally, rent a common area, which is either the conference room where those people are going to be learning anyway. So that was not a bad concept to make.
Yeah.
600 square feet to make maybe hopefully a decent amount of money. But I'm very open if I can get some expertise ideas and maybe launch this as an actual startup business.
We should try to run those numbers and do the market research.
It'd be a fun exercise, I think.
Yeah, I think it would be too.
It'd be a good illustration on how
A great illustration, a good group project.
Well, can I ask a quick question?
Sure, come on, Robert.
The piece you're talking about scaling, well, I guess you scale the whole business, but in Edgar's example there, just as somebody is using a very similar service to his and has for a long time, and eventually will be using him instead of where I'm at now. It's important to anybody running a home business, or at the very least, it has their corporate address at home. So I've got for about a decade now, we've had our corporate address at a very similar setup in Sacramento. But I guess it's one step further than what Edgar is doing in the sense that they'll open the mail and then forward it as needed. So we use it for bills. We use it for I forget what the address is, what they call it on the California site. But if somebody had to serve you some legal documents, they would go there, and they just filter out the junk mail and all that stuff. So it's for anybody running a business where they don't want mail or people showing up uninvited. That's exactly who would use a service like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
And Robert's been using a service like that for a while. So
yeah.
The bank company figured that one out because imagine you guys starting a food truck business. You still need a physical address. You have to put your dad's house.
Yeah, that's true.
That's tough. And I know for sure that's what I'd sell. It's privacy.
You can't.
The lessons that come with the privacy, lessons of how corporations work and all that, kind of just sells it. And all I need is to send them one good referral. Like Hannah, Elizabeth, it's like I want to network and connect you with people that can help your business. When they're connecting with Molly the first day, so that's
right.
Well.
Yeah, that's right. So, well, we're a little bit past 4, so I don't want to keep anybody who's got something else scheduled. So I think we'll wrap it up here, and we will. Thanks for
you can't, Robert.
Participation.
Well, no. His question.
Another question.
I'm just throwing it. I guess more as something to kind of reiterate that what you're doing is a worthy and needed service. Myself, I had looked into the PO box, so that's why I have the place I have, because it just shows Suite 100, and they've got hundreds of other businesses that all use that address. But it's not, as far as the state knows, it's not a PO box.
Yeah, that is right. That is right. So, all
Ron,
right, thank you for that.
One thing I would like to ask as well, with building your business to sell in mind, I would love to learn how to properly evaluate your business in one of our next meetings if you're open to share.
Yeah, I can-
Wow, well, you got the
Help me
right
on
guy,
that one, I
you know, he's right above you. You can't tell it.
Yeah, we could, that's a great
Awesome.
idea.
So,
I could bring
you're-
the spreadsheets in.
and we'll be doing some of that stuff, but in the meantime, you can go to the Micro Giants YouTube channel and look on the playlist. It's got the three amigos, three consulting amigos, and I don't know, we've done 10 hours on that subject, maybe more.
Yeah.
Excellent. I'll
Yeah,
check it out.
Ed has got a system that is really interesting and useful, I think. And so we have done an awful lot of that and explored some ideas, but it's completely applicable to, you know, where should you be looking for the long run and how you use certain drivers in order to make that happen. So
The biggest thing,
Thank you.
and as Edgar will be able to attest to this, the valuation is based on cash flow, future cash flow.
yeah,
So
Right.
if you can generate future cash flow, you can value that business.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're not making any money, there's no value.
yeah, there's no value until you're making some money.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, we need to make some
Okay.
money.
So there's a pearl of wisdom that we'll end on. We'll end on that.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know about that.
All right, great. Hey,
All right,
thanks
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
See you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Take care.
Bye now.
Bye.